Okay, let's unpack this. You know how it is? You could be walking down the street, supposedly focused, right? And then, bam, you realize you've been totally lost in thought for like the last 5 minutes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Happens all the time. And that Harvard research you mentioned is striking almost half our waking hours just
Yeah.
mentally adrift somewhere
Yeah,
else.
nearly 47th percent. It's wild.
It really highlights this fundamental thing about us, the wandering mind.
Yeah.
And that constant internal chatter is exactly why mindfulness feels so relevant. It's like a tool to actually engage with now instead of getting swept away.
Right. And the really exciting bit, I think, for people listening is this isn't just some, vague philosophical concept. There's actual neuroscience, over 1,000 studies now, apparently suggesting that practicing this, focusing intentionally, can literally rewire your brain in like 8 weeks. That's
It,
pretty powerful.
it really is. Think about neuroplasticity, the brain's amazing ability to change.
Sure.
Consistent mindfulness practice seems to strengthen pathways linked to attention, to emotional regulation.
Hmm.
For instance, some studies show long-term meditators might have a thicker prefrontal cortex, that's your focus and decision-making hub, and maybe a less reactive amygdala, which is key for the stress response. So it's not just a feeling, it's like a physical change.
Wow. Okay, so our deep dive today is really about getting under the hood of what real mindfulness is. And crucially for everyone tuning in, how you can actually practically use it day to day. Because the popular idea can be a bit fuzzy, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's this common image, isn't there? Like mindfulness means achieving total inner peace, an empty mind, constant calm. And honestly, that idea can be a real hurdle because, well, that's not really it. It's not even necessarily the goal.
Exactly. You sit down, try to be mindful, and your
Yeah.
brain just throws like a million thoughts at you. So let's get really clear. What is mindfulness at its core?
Well, fundamentally, it involves a few key things. First, it's about cultivating present moment awareness, just noticing what's happening right now, your breath, maybe sounds around you, sensations in your body, without immediately filtering or judging, just being with whatever is.
So like observing the raw data without your inner critic or, cheerleader jumping in straight away.
Precisely. Which leads right into the second key part, non-judgmental observation. This is the tricky skill, maybe, of noticing things just as they are without slapping labels on them like good, bad, right, wrong. It's fostering a kind of acceptance towards your experience, whatever it might be.
That sounds challenging. My mind loves to evaluate everything. How do you even practice that non-judgment thing?
Well, one technique is to consciously view your thoughts like clouds floating by. You see them drift past, but you don't get hooked by their story or judge them for being there. It's about creating a little space,
Mm.
between you and the thought. And the third element is intentional focus, deliberately choosing where you direct your attention. Maybe it's your breath or the feeling of your feet on the floor or specific sounds.
Ah, okay. So it's not about stopping thoughts, which is impossible anyway, but about consciously deciding where your spotlight goes, especially when thoughts pop up.
Exactly that. Think of your mind like, well, it naturally produces thoughts, just like your stomach digests food. Mindfulness is learning to watch that mental activity without getting all tangled up in it.
Mm.
And one source used a great analogy, mental fitness.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, every time you intentionally bring your awareness back, maybe from a thought to your breath, it's like doing a rep in a mental gym. You're strengthening that muscle of focus and observation.
That mental fitness idea really clicks. It makes it feel active, like something you build. Okay, now, the sources laid out 4 practical pillars, ways to actually build this muscle. Let's dig into the first one, the 90-second rule. What's the science behind that?
It's really fascinating, actually, understanding the physiology of emotions. Neuroscience suggests that the initial wave of a primary emotion, that first surge of feeling, has a pretty short life in the body, maybe around 90 seconds. If you let it run its course without adding mental fuel,
Mhm.
evolutionarily, this quick rise and fall would have been vital. Respond fast to danger, then settle back down.
90 seconds. Seriously. Because when you're feeling really intense anger or anxiety, it feels like it lasts forever.
It absolutely does feel that way.
Mhm.
But that initial biochemical rush, it seems, has a natural curve. A start, a peak, and an end. The problem is we often keep it going way past that 90 seconds by piling on thoughts, judgments, stories about the feeling.
Mm.
We basically keep re-triggering the response with our own minds.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do you actually use this 90-second rule when you're feeling totally overwhelmed? Can you walk us through the steps?
Sure. The first step is to name it. As soon as you feel that intense emotion surging, just mentally label it like, okay, this is frustration or this is sadness. Just putting a name on it actually engages your prefrontal cortex, the more rational part of your brain.
Right.
And that helps create a little bit of distance, lets you observe it more objectively.
Interesting. So just naming it gives you a foothold, kind of.
Exactly. Step two is to feel it in your body. Where is it showing up physically? Is your jaw tight? Is there a knot in your stomach? Are your shoulders hunched? Locating these physical sensations anchors your awareness right here, right now, in the direct experience of the emotion, not just the story about it.
Okay, yeah. Shifting from the mental loop to the physical reality. What's the final step?
The final step is to watch it. Observe the emotion and those physical sensations like they're temporary weather patterns passing through you.
Mm.
Notice how they might intensify, maybe peak, and then naturally start to fade within that 90-second window if you don't keep feeding the mental narrative. This helps build detachment, realizing the emotion isn't you, it's just an experience passing through.
So name it, feel it physically, watch it pass without judgment.
Yeah.
And you can potentially short circuit those awful spirals where negative emotions just feed on themselves.
That's the core idea, yeah. It's
Yeah.
about recognizing you can experience the emotion fully without being totally consumed by it or letting it hijack your behavior.
Okay, pillar 1, the 90-second rule. Got it. Let's move to pillar 2. Single tasking as meditation, which in our constant multitasking world sounds almost revolutionary.
It kind of is a shift, isn't it? The basic idea is simple. Consciously bring your full attention to whatever single thing you're doing, no matter how mundane it seems. By doing that, you turn an ordinary activity into, well, a mindfulness practice.
Give us some concrete examples. How can you turn everyday stuff into these mini meditations?
Mindful eating is a classic, powerful one. Instead of, scrolling your phone or watching TV while you eat, really try to savor. Notice the colors, the textures on your plate, the different flavors as you chew, how your body feels as you eat. Just pay attention to the whole process.
I have to admit, I definitely eat on autopilot a lot, actually focusing on the taste and texture. It sounds surprisingly engaging, actually.
It really can be. Another great one is mindful walking. Instead of just rushing from A to B, tune into the actual sensations. Feel the weight shift in your body. Notice the muscles working, the feeling of your feet connecting with the ground, maybe the air on your skin.
Really tuning into those subtle physical things we usually just completely ignore.
Exactly. And then there's mindful listening. When you're talking with someone, try to really listen, not just the words, but the tone, the body language, the pauses. Notice your own internal reactions too, but try not to immediately jump to formulating your reply. Just listen fully.
It's applying that same focused, non-judgmental awareness we talked about earlier, but just to routine actions. It's like your whole day could become a string of opportunities to practice being present.
That's it, precisely. When you fully immerse yourself in the now of whatever you're doing, the ordinary can genuinely start to feel pretty extraordinary.
All right, let's tackle pillar 3, the RAIN technique. This sounds like a really useful one for those heavy moments when emotions just feel like too much. Break down RAIN for us.
Yeah, RAIN is a helpful acronym. It gives you a kind of structured approach for dealing with difficult emotions or thoughts using mindfulness and, importantly, compassion. So the R is for recognize. Just the initial step of acknowledging what's actually happening inside you, what feelings are here, what thoughts are swirling, simply noticing without judging the noticing.
So similar to naming the emotion in the 90-second rule, maybe, but broader, like acknowledging the whole internal landscape.
Yes, exactly, a wider recognition. Then the A stands for allow. This is about making space for whatever you've recognized without trying to fight it or push it away. Doesn't mean you have to like it, but you're choosing not to resist it. Because resistance often just makes it stronger, right? Allowance is about letting it be there.
That sounds really hard, though, especially when it's something painful. Our gut reaction is usually to want it gone immediately.
Oh, absolutely. It's counterintuitive, but resistance often creates its own layer of suffering. Allowance starts to soften that. Then the I in RAIN is for investigate. This means gently exploring the feeling or thought with curiosity and kindness. Where do you feel it most strongly in your body? What beliefs might be underneath it? Approach it gently, like you're trying to understand something, not like you're interrogating yourself harshly.
So getting to know the difficult feeling more intimately, almost like a compassionate scientist observing it.
That's a lovely way to put it, yeah. And the final step, N, stands for nurture. This is crucial. It's about actively offering yourself some compassion and support right in the middle of the difficulty. What do you need right now? Can you offer yourself a kind internal word, maybe place a hand on your heart, some small gesture of self-care? It's meeting your own suffering with kindness.
Ah, so rain isn't just about understanding the emotion, but actively responding to yourself with care and empathy in that moment.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
really powerful practice for building emotional resilience because it teaches you how to be with tough stuff without getting completely overwhelmed or falling back on, unhealthy ways of coping.
That sounds incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the final pillar, pillar four, something I think, well, pretty much everyone struggles with today, technology boundaries.
Oh, definitely. Our devices are literally engineered to grab and hold our attention. Right. They constantly pull us out of the present moment, contributing to that scattered, distracted feeling. So the idea here is to consciously, intentionally create some boundaries to protect our focus and cultivate more presence.
Our sources talked about creating sacred spaces. What does that look like practically for someone listening?
Well, one really practical step is setting up device-free times, especially around the edges of your day. Maybe make the first 30 minutes after you wake up and the last 30 minutes before you sleep totally phone-free.
Ooh.
This lets you wake up and wind down more gently without immediately diving into the digital flood of demands and distractions.
That sounds tough for many of us, me included, reaching for the phone first thing. But I can see how impactful that could be for setting a calmer tone and maybe even sleeping better. What other boundaries could work?
Another good one is aiming for notification-free meals. Turn off the sound, maybe put the phone away completely while you eat. This helps you be more present with your food, like we talked about with mindful eating, and connect better with anyone you might be eating with.
Yeah, it all ties back together, doesn't it? Being fully there for the physical experience instead of splitting your attention with the digital world.
Precisely. And another suggestion is maybe having one digital sunset evening each week. Pick one evening where you intentionally power down non-essential devices for a few hours. Create space for other things, reading, talking, hobbies, just relaxing without that constant screen pull.
It's like consciously wrestling back control of our attention from technology's constant demands.
Exactly. As one of the sources put it so well, your attention is your life guarded accordingly. Setting these boundaries is basically making a conscious choice about where you invest your most valuable mental resource.
Okay, so we've looked at what mindfulness really means and these four practical pillars to bring it into your life. But there are definitely some common myths about mindfulness that might stop people from even trying it. Let's bust a few of those.
Yeah, good idea. A really big one is the belief that mindfulness means clearing your mind. This causes so much frustration, especially for beginners. The truth is, your mind produces thoughts. That's its job. Mindfulness isn't about forcing a blank state. It's about learning to observe those thoughts when they show up without getting carried away by them or beating yourself up for having them.
So it's more about changing your relationship to your thoughts, learning to see them as just mental events, not absolute truths, rather than trying to make them disappear entirely.
Precisely. Another common one is the idea that you need hours of meditation to get any benefit. While longer formal practice can definitely deepen things, even tiny micro moments of awareness throughout your day add up. Bringing your attention to your breath for just a few seconds while waiting in line, noticing your feet on the floor as you walk, these little moments, build that presence muscle.
That's really encouraging, actually. It makes it feel less like another huge task on the to-do list and more like something you can realistically weave into your day in small ways.
Definitely. And finally, there's the myth that mindfulness is about being calm all the time. This sets up such an unrealistic expectation and leads to disappointment. Mindfulness isn't about escaping difficult feelings or forcing yourself into some state of permanent bliss. It's actually about learning to be present with the full range of human experience, including the discomfort, the pain, the difficult emotions, but with more acceptance and less judgment.
Ah, okay. So it's not about avoiding the tough stuff or pretending it's not there, but about meeting whatever comes up, pleasant or unpleasant, with more awareness and maybe less knee-jerk reaction.
Exactly. Real mindfulness embraces the whole messy, beautiful reality of being human, the joys, the sorrows, the peace, the agitation, all with a more open and hopefully accepting heart.
This has been super insightful, really clearing up what mindfulness is and giving some really concrete ways for people listening to start bringing it into their lives. So, thinking about that, what's a simple, practical first step someone could take, like right now?
Well, our source suggested a 21-day presence challenge, which sounds like a really accessible starting point. It involves just 3 simple daily practices. First, in the morning, commit to just 5 minutes of focusing on your breath, just noticing the sensation of air coming in and going out without trying to change it, just observing.
5 minute, that feels very doable. What about during the day?
During the day, the challenge suggests aiming for 3 mindful check-ins. You could even set phone reminders for this. When it goes off, just pause for a moment. Notice, what am I doing right now? What sensations are in my body? What thoughts are going through my mind? Again, no judgment, just a quick observation, a little snapshot of your present moment.
Just a brief pause to reconnect, right, amidst the chaos of the day. And what about an evening practice?
Then, in the evening, take a few moments for gratitude reflection. Just think about maybe 3 things from your day, big or small, that you feel grateful for. This helps shift focus towards the positive and cultivates appreciation for what is present.
So, a little focused breathing to start, intentional check ins to reconnect during the day, and gratitude reflection to end. That really does sound like an approachable way to start building that mental fitness we talked about earlier.
It really is. And, for everyone listening, you could even just make a silent intention right now. Commit to being just a little more present in whatever you do next,
Uh-huh.
whether that's taking a sip of coffee or just turning your attention fully to your next task.
Absolutely. A great starting point. And on that note, let's just circle back to where we started this whole deep dive. Remember that mind boggling statistic almost half our lives potentially spent lost in the maze of our own thoughts. But as we've explored, you actually have the power, the capacity to step out of that maze and truly inhabit the richness of this moment. Remember, this moment right here, right now, it's the only one you ever truly have.